an immediate recess. So because this is a downtown Santa Rosa property and item before us tonight, we were duly supposed to start the meeting at 5 p.m. So we are going to recess until 5 p.m. and then we are going to take the agenda from the top. So with apologies to fellow board members and anyone else who's on the line, we'll go ahead and recess and we'll see you again at 5 p.m.
Warren, your video's still on, just FYI.
Okay, I thought you liked my
Hi, Gina Kincaid. This is the host. I just want to make sure you're with us so we can start.
I'm with you.
Perfect. All right, time is 5 o'clock. I believe staff is ready. Go ahead when you are.
Great. There we go. Okay, welcome back, everybody. For those of you just joining us, we opened the meeting, called the meeting to order at 4:30 and went on a recess until 5 p.m. Due to the project being in the downtown area, we were supposed to start the hearing at 5 p.m. and here we are. So we're starting from the top of the agenda. Go ahead and acknowledge why we're here in this format, and then we'll get going. So due to the provisions of the governor's executive orders N-25-20 and N-29-20, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act, and the order of the health officer of the County of Sonoma to shelter in place to minimize the spread of COVID-19, the design review board members will be participating via Zoom webinar. So that's why we're here. Members of the public are able to join us both via Zoom webinar and by teleconference. There are several options for posting of public comment. There are options before the meeting to both email and leave voicemails for staff, which we've received a few in our agendized packet. There will also be 2 opportunities for public comment this afternoon, evening, and that is under item number 4, which is general public comment on items under this board's preview and purview, I should say, and agendized item number 6, which will be specific to the project we are hearing. So with that, Patty, may I have a roll call, please?
Let the record reflect that all board members are present.
Thank you, Patty. Item number 2, approval of the minutes. We have draft minutes from our August 2020 meeting. Are there any corrections, clarifications? Drew, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple actually. So under item 6.1, it says I left the meeting, which I didn't because I was the motioner. So that would have been kind of hard to make a vote. So it's after the initial motion. I think the first motion on page 3. And then on page 4, under item 6.2, it says I also left the meeting, which again would have been a challenge because I was the motioner. And then under item 6.2, under the voting, Vice Chair Hedgepeth is listed as absent and he was the seconder. So that should be changed. And then at that point, before item 6.3, I left the meeting because I had to abstain from item 6.3. So those are the changes I had on that.
Great, I appreciate that. I didn't catch your leaving the meeting multiple times, but I did catch Warren's motion and being absent or so I think this is a Granicus issue, but Patty will try and resolve that into the record anyways. So thank you for that. Any other clarification points? Okay, we'll go ahead and put those into the record with Drew's called out amendments. Okay, item number 3, board business. This is where we differentiate ourselves from other boards and commissions within the city. So I will be reading from Zoning Code Chapter 20-52.030F, Project Review. The review authority shall consider the location, design, site plan configuration, and the overall effect of the proposed project upon surrounding properties in the city in general. Review shall be conducted by comparing the proposed project to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards and requirements, consistency of the project within the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, and other applicable city requirements, i.e. city policy statements and development plans. So that's this board's purview. At this point in time, I'd like to open up for public comment. These would be comments that are germane to this board and general in nature. Again, we will have public comments specific to the item we're hearing this evening at a later time. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. So Patty, do we have anybody wishing to make public comment at this time?
Right now, I do not see any raised hands for public comments.
Okay, and did we receive any general public comment either by email or voicemail for this meeting?
I did not receive any voicemails or emails.
Great. We'll give it a moment to see if anybody raises their hand.
Looks like we still have no raised hands.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to item number 5 on the agenda, statements of abstention by board members. Do we have any board members needing to abstain from this item?
Don't laugh. This is board member Cordenbrock. I have to abstain again for this item. So due to the involvement on the design team again. I'm sorry.
Great. No,
but thank you.
Yeah, no need to apologize for your abstention. And again, congratulations and being involved with the project. So
yeah, thanks everyone.
See you next time.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We are on to our scheduled item number 6, specifically item number 6.1. This is a concept design review, 556 Ross Street, file number DR20-036. And we have Senior Planner Andrew Triple to give us a presentation. I will turn it over to Mr. Triple.
Just be 1 minute, Chair.
Chair Kincaid, this is interim senior planner Adam Ross. There's a little change. I am giving the presentation tonight, which I hope is to your liking. So I will go ahead and start sharing my screen in just a second here.
You got it. Thanks for the info.
Okay, do you see that?
Yep, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, like I said, I'm Adam Ross, interim senior planner, reporting for the concept design review item 556 Ross Street. And I thank you, Chair Kincaid, and members of the board for being here tonight. A little bit about the project as far as it relates to the housing action plan. It's a total of 109 units. 98 are at a market rate. 11 units of that are at income qualified. Right now it's proposed at low income. So that's 0.4% of the low income housing goals and 3.8% of the market rate goals to be completed, constructed by 2022. Here's an aerial view of the project location. As you can see, it's centrally located in downtown. You have 101 to the west. You have Courthouse Square just southeast, just down Mendocino Avenue. It's on the corner of Ross Street and Mendocino Avenue. The site itself right now is a parking lot, a private parking lot. I believe it's 34 spaces, and it would be obviously constructed in this footprint. There are existing buildings around. The project overall proposes 0 setbacks, which is per the development standards, which I'll show on a later slide. The general plan land use designation. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll go back one. Nope, it's okay. So the general plan land use designation is retail and business services. As you can see, that's fairly common in the downtown area. Some of the policies of the general plan included are to allow residential uses in downtown. So the residential density would be covered in the zoning district. In this case, that zoning district is CD10 station area. That provides for a mixture of ground floor pedestrian-oriented shops, restaurants, and other office and commercial uses. Residential units may be either a freestanding project or incorporated into mixed use as well. So a couple things going on here. The downtown station area specific plan will go by FAR, floor area ratio. In simple terms, that's if it's FAR of 1, and you have a 1,000 square foot site, that's 1,000 square feet of buildable area. You could build up, however the design team comes up with that concept. They could do 500 and 500, 2 floors, but essentially it gives a lot more market-driven approaches for that. And then, so some of the essential project characteristics in the current zoning CD10, no required lot size, no maximum density as well in this case. Front setbacks, none allowed, meaning it has to be up to the property frontage. Side, same as front, has to be up there. So an internal side setback is none except 5 feet when adjacent to a residential zone or use, and same thing for the rear. Lot coverage up to 100%. Height limit under current zoning district development standards, you have 10 stories with a maximum of 150 feet. The required parking is 1 space per unit and 28 bicycle parking spaces overall. So the lot size is 12,722 square feet. It's proposed at 109 units. There's no front or side or rear setbacks required. It's less than 100% of lot coverage, and the proposed height is 8 stories at 98 feet to top of roof. They are proposing 11 vehicle spaces and 109 bicycle spaces. So the bicycle space breaks down to 1 per unit. Some of those, so in the future plan, the current update to the downtown station area specific plan, there is no parking requirement. So I'll let the applicant go over some of that concept in the design. So in this case, it would comply with the future plan. However, there are affordable housing incentives and concessions for parking that are available should they meet the standards for providing on-site affordable units. The required entitlements, you have a concept design review by the board. So this is part of the resilient city development measures. So in priority development areas, as you've seen plenty of times before, you have what used to be a major design review is now a minor, after coming to the board as a concept item, as a more complete package, and allowing the board to make comments and considerations and recommendations to be brought forward. And then the minor design review would be, application would be submitted with those considerations in mind, and processed and reviewed and approved by staff and a recommendation to the zoning administrator. And then final design reviews by planning staff. Under those same resilient city development measures, attached multifamily is allowed by right if it was a minor use permit before. So the only entitlements here are minor design review. And a neighborhood meeting will also be required. Some other regulations affecting that may or may not affect this project, 20-10.050E. So that means that if they submitted next week and the project was complete before the downtown station area specific plan update was done, then they could choose which zoning code or which zoning code, the current one or the one that would be adopted later that they would go by. 21-02 .110 of the city code goes over affordable housing incentives. And that could relate to height, setback, and parking as well. And with that, that concludes staff's presentation. I'm open to any questions you may have, and the applicant team has also prepared a presentation.
Thank you, Interim Senior Planner Ross. Appreciate the presentation. Did you want to take us through any of the correspondence received?
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, the project has received several letters of support, including the Greenbelt Alliance. There were Burbank. Sorry, let me just pull these up so I name the right. Sorry. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up all the correct names so that I accurately represent who supported the project.
Yep, no problem.
Okay. So we have Generation Housing has provided support for the project. They've provided a letter provided to the board as late correspondence. Burbank Housing has also expressed their support for the infill development proposed before you today, with as well as Esteban Promis. And again, I hope I pronounced that name correctly. The Sonoma County Transportation and Land Use Coalition also supports the project. We have the Greenbelt Alliance also in support of the project, which was provided. We also have the Metro Chamber, and just a couple more here. And then also Andrea Demakis as well is in support of the project. And North Bay Leadership Council is in support of the project as well. which was a letter provided. There were some questions asked by 2 members of the public on how the project, kind of a bit more of what the project is about, and these are potential concerns. Under the zoning code, there is a 5-foot setback required when adjacent to a residential use. There is from Dino D'Argento, brought these up. There should be landscape and greenery within the same 5-foot setback area of that said residential setback, and specifically talking about the site immediately adjacent to the west of the project of the current location. There is an approved reuse for 1 residential unit. And a lot of those comments were also about the access to Ross Street, the proposed access, if that was to be EV only, or if there is some limited access, or if it's pedestrian only. And then another concern brought by Will Chang, which I have here, which was received this afternoon. If this project has its own indoor parking facility, such as an underground garage, and then concerns about that, what Ross Street would be if it was a pedestrian only or EV only street. Does that eliminate all the street parking? What effect does that have on street parking for the existing location? And whether or not parking on the corner of B Street and Ross Street also considered as another proposed site for this for a similar development. And so just sort of concerns about what Ross Street looks like, a setback, some issues. Another question came up about the west elevation and the design there, and how that affects the street parking and surrounding neighborhood. And that would conclude the summarization of public comments received, correspondence received.
Thank you again, Mr. Ross, much appreciated. At this time, I'd like to welcome the applicant team to give their presentation. And if you could give your name and relationship to the project before you speak, that would be very helpful. So welcome, applicant team. Looking forward to the presentation.
Great. Hello again. This is Pauline Block. I handle the marketing and the development for Cornerstone, and I'm going to kick off our presentation here. I was going to, with the unique situation of having 2 hearings back to back with DRB, I was going to skip through our intro a little bit, but I see there is a new board member on that I don't think was on last night, so I'll still give an intro to who Cornerstone is. We can go ahead to the next slide. And then after that, I'll introduce you to the team we have on tonight that's available to answer questions, and also have Ben Wrigley with our architecture team go over the building and site design. Next slide. So Cornerstone Properties, we are a local North Bay property, commercial property owner mostly. We have about 30 properties between Pilum and Santa Rosa. They are mostly industrial, office, and R&D spaces. However, we do have a handful of these development sites, as well as some of our projects, kind of our special projects, which I'll go into. We really, have a different approach to our buildings and projects than a typical developer, because this is our first residential project. We don't really see ourselves as a developer. We look for innovative ways to approach our projects and our buildings. All of our projects are long-term investments for our company, so it's really important that our decisions are meaningful and impactful for what we would like to see in Santa Rosa's future. So we can go ahead to the next slide. This is just a quick overview of our team. We have our Petaluma headquarters office, and there are 5 of us. So even though we have a lot of property, we do We do a lot in the office, and we also work with a lot of outside consultants who are experts in their areas to fill the gaps. Next slide, please. So CoLab is a co-working space that we opened in downtown Santa Rosa. It's on the ground floor of the Press Democrat building. We do own that site, right across from actually the project we'll be talking about tonight. So we had donated this after the 2017 Tubbs fire, and it was used as the local assistance center for fire victims. And now it's a co-working space. We saw the need for it in our community and wanted to try it out. We now have about 120 members. There are small businesses, entrepreneurs, and also lots of community groups use our meeting rooms, or did use our meeting rooms, and hopefully will be back again next year. Next slide. We also have an artisan maker space, which is kind of a project in the works. This is in Pengrove. If you're familiar with the old Adobe lumber site, we have revitalized some of those barn buildings, and we are very focused on creating affordable spaces for artists to work out of and interact with the public. So we have Feed Sonoma, who aggregates small farmer produce and sells it for them. We have Harmony Farms, who opened their second garden supply store on site. Soap Cauldron is another maker that we have in the space who does artisan skincare and soaps. And then also really micro studio artists are there. So, and this is actually also something you'll probably see in our developments, is really trying to incorporate arts and affordable spaces for them to work out of. All right, next slide. So on the call tonight, myself with Cornerstone, Ben Wrigley with Solomon Cordwell Benz, that's the architect, Peter Stanley with Archeologic, he's focusing on the planning side, Rick Carlisle with PKF Engineers, and Christine Talbot with Quadriga Landscape Architecture and Planning. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben to go over our site design and building, and thank you for your time tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
We've got you loud and clear, Ben. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you again. If you would go to the next slide, please, I'll get started. So there was an indication of the site earlier. I think it is worth pointing out, if whoever is controlling the slide can help me just a little, a couple of important features around the site. We're obviously at the corner of Mendocino and Ross. You might hear mentioned during the discussion the B Street parking lot, which is across the street from our site along Ross Street at the corner of Ross and B Street. There's also the Press Democrat building immediately to the south of the site. Along Ross Street, there's a big structure called the Brickyard, which may well get mentioned as well. Also, the 7th Street parking garage is one of the parking garages underutilized in the downtown area that will probably come up as part of our discussion about parking strategy on the site. There's such a small amount of parking spaces, and then obviously there is the mall on the other side of B Street. If you go to the next slide, please. So what you see on the screen now is really a very sort of simplified site plan in a way, and it talks about the approach that we have taken to planning the building. This is a constrained downtown urban site, the kind that we like very much as architects with the challenges that it offers. You can see the main transit route along Mendocino Avenue and the pedestrian route that tracks Mendocino and along Ross Street. And the red outline that you see on the site itself really indicates where we would propose to put the building, the reasonable depth of the building that could create the right size and square footage of units, while also creating a usable piece of green space and the internal lot lines on the northwest corner of the site. Also, you'll notice a kind of green diagram with 3 arrows coming out of it that shows an opportunity to provide amenity for this building and also to introduce some character to the building at that level. That manifests itself as a small roof terrace up at the top of the building. And lastly, I think the main opportunity on this site, as we and as we provide a lot of these types of infill projects, is to really activate the street. So you can see along Mendocino and along Ross Street, as indicated by those red arrows, the opportunities here to really engage with the neighborhood, activate the street, and provide amenity to both the building occupants and to the community at large. Next slide, please. In terms of the design narrative, and you will see in the next slide, while this might be on the larger side for downtown Santa Rosa right now, this is a pretty compact building. It has a long elevation onto Ross Street and a shorter elevation on Mendocino. And what this slide is talking about, if you've looked at it in any detail, is a couple of things. First of all, in that column on the left, we're looking at ways to modulate the building along Ross Street, both in the way that we express the form of the roofs and also the way we modulate the character of the windows and the facades. And this is doing a couple of things. With the peaked roofs that you'll see, we're starting to recall some ideas about old industrial or agricultural buildings. It's also a very sort of residential motif. And with the way that we are providing the punch windows in there, we're adding scale and some residential character to the building. In that middle column, you'll see the way that we have approached materials. It's a very simple material palette on the building. We're anticipating white or very light cement plaster, and then a dark material, which as currently rendered is a standing seam metal roof and wall panel system that you'll see. This is concept design, so we are investigating these materials a lot. And finally, you'll see some wood accents, bringing a bit of warmth to this, but a very simple, clean material palette. On the far right-hand side, those two images really indicate the opportunity as it relates to the streetscape and the common public space. So we're looking at opportunities of opening up the building on the ground floor, inviting the public in, activating it with indoor-outdoor space, and what those opportunities might be. And also, trying to bring some dynamism to the character of the streetscape and the paving. Next slide, please. So here we can see an overall image of the building. You can see that activity along Mendocino. We're stood on Mendocino, and Ross is, going off into the distance between our building and the Press Democrat building on the left. So we look to open up the building as much as possible on the ground floor, and then a real simple application of the materials, bringing an accent, a contrasting element with the darker material down onto Mendocino, and then that very simple modulated facade along Ross, lending it that scale and context. You can see also on the facade here a number of what we would refer to as Juliet balconies, which would be an applied balcony element, which would allow the facade to have larger openings, get a bit more fresh air into the space. Not a true balcony, but more of an applied handrail, if you like, to the facade of the building. Again, it will give it some more definitive residential character and help to activate the facade of the building. And then lastly, you can see up in the right-hand side there an indication of where that roof terrace might be. We've got 109 apartments, 33 studios, 21 urban one-bedrooms, which are kind of bigger than a studio, smaller than a one-bed, and live a little differently. It's a typology that you'll see in some of the floor plans. 42 one-bedroom units, more traditional one-beds, and then 13 two-bedrooms. 9 parking spaces. In fact, I think we have 11 in the plans. I think as we design that parking system, I believe we're close to 11. But really, it's the parking is provided not by below-grade parking, as I believe was one of the earlier questions, but by a mechanized parking system, which is an automated parking system with one access point from Ross Street. The car will enter in off Ross Street, and it will be kind of shuffled around and then delivered back to you when it's time to go. These are systems we've used in a lot of different urban conditions similar to this. Focus on bike parking with one space per unit. And then on the ground floor, importantly, a lot of retail and community space. We're doing a lot of work on that. And currently there are ongoing conversations about providing childcare that's a use that we're keen to explore on the ground floor. I know Cornerstone is currently in discussions with several groups, such as the North Bay Children's Centre, looking at how we might provide childcare at the ground floor, which is seen as really needed in the downtown area and a really valuable community resource to provide in a building such as this. Next slide, please. On this slide, we can see, again, at a conceptual level, a proposal for Ross Street. So we've zoomed out here, and we're looking at Ross Street and the potential for the future development of the sites on the Press Democrat building and also on the B Street parking lot, and the opportunity that this presents to recast Ross Street as more of a slow street, a pedestrian-friendly street that also provides the necessary EV access and also provides a limited amount of traffic access to serve the buildings that are along here, the entrances, the parking access that's required. So this is kind of a slow street, if you like. It is less about cars, more about something that can be activated, and really something that we see that could be an amenity to the city and to this community. So you can see those images on the lower portion of the page, how retail and cafe type spaces might interact with the street, how we provide additional areas for extended patio seating and outdoor dining, and actually art and performance spaces, and perhaps the opportunity to invigorate it with art stalls and food truck type operations, really a potential event space in the heart of the city. Next slide, please. So just zooming in a little closer on the Brickyard end, the west end of Ross Street, and showing some of the possibilities that might entail relative to street furniture, paving patterns, and the way that we might start to really invigorate the street there. Next slide. And then the building itself. So here we see the building outlined, and then the proposal for the ground floor. You see the street trees along Mendocino and an indication of the paving pattern that we might provide along Ross Street. And then the outdoor space that serves the building itself. Again, I mentioned the childcare as a potential use on the ground floor. This outdoor space would actually make that use possible. If that doesn't become the use on the ground floor, it certainly would become a great amenity for the building or for potential retail or other community spaces along Mendocino. Those conversations are ongoing. Next slide, please. And so here's a closer in view of what it might look like along Mendocino, with the street a bit more activated, and importantly along Ross with the street frontage and the storefronts opening up there. There'd be residential access and perhaps some of the building's amenity spaces along Ross Street, but with the more community spaces focused towards the corner. If you go to the next slide, you'll see as you move away from the corner of Ross and Mendocino, we do have, these buildings do necessitate a lot of mechanical, electrical spaces, interfaces with the city utilities. We're going to have to provide space for that on the ground floor, as well as access to the mechanical parking spaces that you can see indicated here. And then we'll have to make provisions for a van accessible space that you can see there as well. And then some of the amenities that we would typically provide in a building like this: some lounge space for the residents, substantial bike storage to serve every unit in the building, small fitness area, and a lobby. And you can see there with the pink arrows, those suggested points of entrance into the building that could, adapt depending on how this ground floor develops. The takeaway is a very activated Mendocino, and as you turn onto the corner of Ross there. Next slide, please. Going up through the building, this is a typical floor plan of the building. It's 8 stories. You see the combination of studios, 1-beds, and those larger 2-bedroom units on the corner and on the other end of the elevation along Mendocino. Next slide. And then as we get up to the top, an indication of the rooftop lounge and terrace space that would be provided as an amenity to the residents. Next slide. These are some of the units as they currently stand in the building at this conceptual level, the planning modules, if you like, smaller units, 380 to even a little bit smaller for the studios as we're planning them out. one bedroom in the upper right-hand side, 590 square feet, small unit. The urban one bedroom, as you can see, is kind of an amped up studio, if you like, with a bit more living space than a typical studio, coming in at about 550 square feet, and then a more recognizably typical 2-bedroom floor plan on the lower right-hand side. Next slide, please. And then just the last couple of images here to look at the facades of the building. So you can see simply the materials applied here along Mendocino, how we're using the roof terrace and the contrasting material of the standing seam cladding shown in that upper right-hand side to provide, a slightly more slender proportion to the building as it meets the corner of Ross and Mendocino. And then you'll see here in a little more detail how those windows get modulated. Ground floor storefront. We're looking at warming up the ground floor storefront. We had a conversation last night about robust materials on the ground floor. We know that's important here. We're investigating certain materials for the ground floor here, including potentially warming up with some timber elements using a thermally modified wood, which, there are several projects where we could point you to for examples of that. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see the elevation along Ross Street. Again, very simple modulated facade with those distinctive roof forms, giving the building its character and lending it some scale along the street there. The activated cafe on the corner of Ross and Mendocino, and the building lobby as you move away from the corner, and then some of those other ancillary spaces, parking access and the accessible van space access. And on the last slide, next slide, please. We'll leave it here with just returning to this view at the corner of Ross and Mendocino. So similar to last night, Peter Stanley is on and he's going to field questions, and I'll remain on available to answer any questions that come our way. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ben. This is Pauline. I just wanted to add one thing. Sorry, going back to the just the parking structure that we have put in here with the mechanical parking. We do envision having some of those be, a shared fleet of vehicles for the building that can be used by residents, so they wouldn't need to necessarily have their own cars. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And I think, Peter, do you have any other comments? I think I skipped you at the very beginning regarding some of the affordability.
Sorry, Pauline, I just jump in and say one thing. I did get a correction from my team in real time here. I misspoke about the number of parking spaces. It will actually be 9, not the 11 that I mentioned. I was a little bit out of date there. So sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Well, that sort of plays off of, I just want to, there are a couple things. Certainly the affordability. I know that last night we had questions about, sort of the loss of maybe not more affordability in this. I just wanted to address it because it's of course of a concern to everybody, and it's actually a cornerstone of cornerstone properties to find ways in which we can provide housing for a cross section of the economic demographic of Santa Rosa. That is a big portion of what these projects are trying to do. So there is the 10% affordability that, deed restricted, low income, not moderate. So we're actually trying to dig a little deeper into affordability with that. But the other thing that Ben touched on, I just want to reiterate, is there's also affordability by design, because there are a lot of people in this community at the lower end of the economic scale that actually don't qualify for affordable housing, but can't really afford, the rents that are coming out of some of the projects, many of the projects that are being built in this community. So these unit sizes are going to allow us to bring that sort of rent structure down. And then there's also just the market rate. So we're sort of trying to cover a lot of bases here. And it is, as many of you know on the board, building affordable housing without substantial state and federal subsidies is very difficult to make pro formas work in the North Bay. So we're doing the best that we can, and I just wanted to sort of lay that on there in your minds as to we're not ignoring it. We're doing as much as we can to make this happen. There was the other thing Ben touched on it, certainly about Ross Street. I just want to say we're bringing this forward to you as an idea. It's a concept we came up with. Ross Street, as it sits right now, is, you know, it's functional, but it doesn't really take a public piece of infrastructure and use it to its best ability, we don't believe. So this is an idea. It's, you know, Ben talked about sort of a slow street as opposed to a cut through between Mendocino Avenue and B Street. And we're looking at this. We certainly understand there are a lot of technical issues associated with it, but we have run it by traffic, we've run it by fire, we've run it by planning. Everybody likes the idea of it. We're bringing it to you to get feedback on that as well. You know, not the least of which is, you know, is this even affordable? We don't even really understand at this point the cost of what it would be to do these kinds of improvements, but we like the idea of it, and we'd certainly like to explore it more. And we're just here to get some feedback from you on the concept. So I think having said that, we're kind of through our presentation. We'll hand it back to you, and we're certainly all ready to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, sorry, writing down a few notes there. So at this time, and thank you to the applicant team for a presentation. Again, much like yesterday evening, the presentation helps out dramatically with kind of where you got to with this concept design and how you got there. So at this time, I'd like to open up item 6.1 for public comment. Any members of the public that we see out there wishing to comment on item 6.1?
We do have a few, Chair Kincaid, and okay, I'm going to start with Cynthia Murray. And Cynthia, I've unmuted you.
Thank you. I hope I didn't just contradict what you did.
You're good. You're loud and clear, Cynthia. Thanks for joining us. And we've got
my pleasure. I am the CEO of North Bay Leadership Council. We did submit a letter, but I am just so excited about this project. I wanted to make sure that you heard from me in person or virtually that this project is exactly what we think the downtown needs. We have been really excited about how much Santa Rosa has done to try and attract new housing. And this is what I envisioned when we talked about what kind of new housing we could have. Affordable by design, including childcare facility possibilities, which is so critically important when we've lost like 50% of our childcare slots. The way that they've tried to envision doing the parking and having a fleet of cars available, just everything about it is exactly what we would use in this city and find as a domino effect to attract other kinds of developers and builders to want to come in. So I really hope this project moves forward. We couldn't get it built soon enough, and it'll be a wonderful addition to downtown Santa Rosa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Much appreciate your comments.
Okay, next we have Terry Shore. And Terry, I've unmuted you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, good evening. My name is Terry Shore. I am the Advocacy Director at Greenbelt Alliance. And Greenbelt Alliance is an environmental nonprofit that promotes climate smart housing to make our communities safer and more inclusive, I mean. So we did submit letters and the press release that we sent out, and Greenbelt Alliance is extremely proud to endorse the proposed infill development by Cornerstone Properties at 556 Ross Street in Santa Rosa. It will help the city of Santa Rosa make significant progress toward your arena goals and also provide much needed housing for those who live and work in Santa Rosa. It will help reduce commute times and greenhouse gas emissions. The Cornerstone Properties proposed density increase is an essential component of downtown Santa Rosa's continued success and evolution. It's consistent with the downtown specific plan existing and the updated version that's moving forward. The re-envision of Ross Street to include 109 affordable design by design apartments will bring critically needed housing to the city center. And we also really like the private and public amenity spaces at the street level that will modernize the area and bring desired uses in, which is essentially an underutilized site. So I'll just end by saying that we are at a critical turning point in the climate crisis, and we need to act now to reduce our GHG emissions and build resilient communities. So to be resilient in the face of climate change starts with better identifying our climate risks in the built environment and our natural systems, and taking an educated, holistic, and equitable view on how to address them. So creating higher density living enhances the quality of life, and this project is a huge step to show how projects can survive and thrive and meet those goals, and with less parking. So again, thank you very much to Cornerstone and to the partners at Archeologics and the other partners for taking the leap and being brave and bringing this to the city of Santa Rosa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shore, for your comments. Much appreciated.
Okay, next we have Peter Rumble. And Peter, you're unmuted.
Thank you so much, and good evening once again to the Design Review Board. And my comments are much similar to what they were last night. And you have the letter of support from the Chamber of Commerce. And so instead of going through all those points, I just want to again frame that this project is shouldn't be seen on its own, and it is a step forward toward the direction and future that the residents of our city need and deserve. We are at a critical point in our community's history, and it sounds like hyperbole, but I do not believe it is. It's a turning point for the better or for the worse, and the better is projects like the one before you today. So I encourage you to move it forward with your thoughtful comments as expeditiously as possible. And I look forward to seeing a shovel in the ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rumble, for your time.
One moment. Next we have Zach Berkowitz. And Zach, you're unmuted. I mean, you're muted. Unmuted.
Hi. First of all, team Cornerstone and Archeologics, very well done. Great vision here. And now it's really up to the execution. So your work is cut out for you. One question, the type of construction, is this intended for modular with a podium, or how are you planning to build this?
So, Mr. Berkowitz, we'll go ahead and log your question, and if you can stay on the line when we have board questions towards the applicant, we'll get those answered for you. But we're going to keep this as your comments and not a dialogue. But I'll give you a reset on your clock.
I'm good. I just wanted to congratulate these guys. They've done a phenomenal job. Great architect and great vision. So
excellent. We'll get that modular question answered, and appreciate your comments.
Okay, next we have Luke Lindenbush.
Hello, thank you to both the Design Review Board and the Cultural Heritage Board, staff of City of Santa Rosa, and the applicant for bringing this project forward tonight. My name is Luke Lindenbush, and I'm with Generation Housing. I just want to speak a little bit to why we're endorsing this project and very excited about it, and why we wrote a letter of support in favor of 556 Ross Street. For a lot of the reasons that we supported the project that came before you last night, it's really exactly the type of infill transit-oriented development that we need in downtown Santa Rosa. And it's also in line with the goals of the Downtown Station Area Specific Plan, which is a community-driven process and really important to consider as we move development forward and build a more vibrant downtown. But this project in particular is really exciting for two reasons that we found, one of which is it's affordable by design. So a lot of the time when people think about affordable housing, we think deed restricted units, right? But a lot of what affordable housing can be, as well as this affordable by design concept, that is a lot of these units under 1,000 square feet that we really haven't seen built in our community over the last 20, 30, 50 years. So it's really important to bring that to our downtown, and a space where people who don't need all of the square footage of a single family home can find a place to be part of the community and afford to be part of this community. But it also does have the 10% deed restricted affordable housing as part of the inclusionary zoning for the project as well. The second reason we're really excited about this in particular is that it takes away really barren, underutilized surface level parking and transforms it into a part of the fabric of a really vibrant downtown. So large empty parking lots in our downtown don't make people want to come to downtown. It doesn't make people feel safe in our downtown. And putting a project that's going to give people really badly needed housing is exactly the type of project that we need in Santa Rosa. So for a lot of the same reasons as we brought up last night as generation housing on the project on 6th Street, we really just encourage you to consider the community benefits of this project because we think it's really promising. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Lindenbush.
Okay, Chair Kincaid, I don't see any more raised hands.
Okay.
Oh, one raised one just went up.
You got it.
Let me find it. Okay. Musa Abbasi, and you are unmuted.
Thank you. This is Musa Abbasi. I am a citizen of Santa Rosa, and I have a small business in downtown Santa Rosa, and I'm here just to endorse this project and look forward to its being built, so as you know, like business owners and employees in downtown can work and live in downtown. Thank you for the team for doing a good job, and look forward to the construction of this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Abbasi.
Okay, Chair Kincaid, we have one more. It says the engine, and you are unmuted.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, this is Chris Denny. I'm a business owner and a property owner adjacent. So I'm on Mendocino and 5th at 409 Mendocino. And I just want to say that I've been really encouraged by both their process and the design. They've been incredible neighbors in reaching out to us and our needs. And yeah, I'm really excited to see the project come together. And I don't need any more time. Sorry, I'm not great at public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. Much appreciated.
Okay, I don't see any more raised hands. So if anybody else would like to speak, if you could raise your hand and we can unmute you. Okay, I think that was all the public speakers.
Okay, and do we have any voicemails to listen into the record?
No voicemails today.
And any late emails that we received that we need to read into the record?
If our planner could speak to that, I don't have any.
Chair Kincaid, no other voicemails were received today. One of the emails received today from Will Chang was summarized into my presentation.
Great. Well, then, hearing no one else come forward, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on this item and bring it back to the board. Let's start out with questions for the applicant. Let's start out with Board Member Wagle. Questions for the applicant or staff for that matter, sorry.
So with this project not coming back to us, and then I guess that public comment about the 5-foot setback on the, I guess, the west side, the minimum setback. That's obviously a plan check element, but also a zoning element. Should we, I don't know, provide comment on what we'd like to see in that 5-foot setback potentially, or just let it ride with what's in the zoning? I think that's maybe a question for Adam and Bill.
Yeah, before Bill might want to add a little more here, but I think that's fair that if you can think of what you would like to see if that were to be a 5-foot setback, but also just to note that there are concessions that can be applied for and potentially given to you, provided the affordability component of the project.
Cool. And then I guess my other question is for the applicant. So I guess with the inclusion of childcare as an option on the ground floor, I guess I was scratching my head a little bit on the unit mix. I know with smaller units comes more density, more units in a smaller footprint. But there's only, I think it's 11 2+ family units. No, sorry, 13. I'm sorry. So with having, kind of this idea that you would include childcare, but then you don't have many child-friendly units, I guess we'll call them. How I'm curious about the applicant's thinking on that.
Pauline, you could probably take care of that.
Yeah, hi, Pauline Bach here. I'm actually dealing with getting a child out of the room, so it's timely. So the childcare that we're proposing is going to be open to the community. There are not a lot of childcares within the downtown area, so we feel that there's a lot of people working in downtown. There's all of our city center there, so it would be something that's open to the public. And we have received advice from multiple childcare centers that it's something that's needed and that it would be filled very quickly. So that's our intention there.
Well, I think that, that was my question. Is it just primarily for residents, or is it more community focused? And obviously that you answered that very well. I believe those are all my questions for both applicant and staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Weigel. Let's go ahead with Board Member Sharon. Questions for staff and the applicant?
Sure. Just a follow-up question on Drew's question about the 5-foot setback. That was my only real question. And Adam, thank you for talking a bit about that there could be concessions for the affordability. So just to clarify what's actually going on there, there's one unit of residential in Mr. Argenzio's building. And so would the one unit trigger that 5-foot setback, or I'm just curious if you could explain even a little bit more about the concessions. Thanks.
Sure. We haven't fully fleshed out if one unit would apply or not, because we're still at the concept level, and that kind of came up recently in some conversations. But if it were to apply, essentially the amount, depending on the percentage of the project that is provided as on-site affordable and what level of affordability that is, whether that be very low income, or moderate, or even supportive housing, that would dictate any sort of density bonus. However, in this case, there is no maximum density, I should say. But you could still receive concessions without actually having more units than are allowed, if that makes sense. So you can you can provide on site for the purpose of receiving a concession. They would have to, there's a little bit more from the applicant that would have to explain, kind of justify why it's needed. Usually that has to do with the feasibility of a project with a certain development standard. But that would all have to be looked at when we get to that point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because you know, any residential unit is, you know, it doesn't in the code say any amount of residential unit, so it's 1 or it's 100. You know, I would imagine it would trigger it as well. But I imagine that, and this sort of morphs the question into a question for the applicant too. If you know, having a 5-foot setback seems like a pretty big, it would be a pretty big change. And just wondering if that is looming overhead. And so it's partially a question for you, Adam. Is this really looming there? And then for the applicant, how would this really affect your decision-making and the feasibility of the project?
Well, I'll answer to the applicant's position. This is something new that literally recently came up. And so this is a building that they converted sort of a second store area into a residential unit. And by doing so, they literally reduced our development capabilities on the adjacent site. I can say that unit sits on the property line as it is now. There's no windows in it because you can't have windows on a property line. I can tell you that if it is the determination of planning that we would need to set 5 feet back, that's a significant problem in an infill project. I can tell you, I'm not going to sit here and say that's a deal killer, but I can tell you that's a significant problem in trying to fit what we're trying to fit into this 12,000 square foot site. So we would most definitely use state density bonus concessions and incentives that are provided by the city for reduction or elimination of setbacks.
Okay, yeah, it does sound pretty, it would make a very drastic change. And so I was glad to hear, Adam, when you mentioned that there are concessions that could be applied to this as well.
And I'll just, you know, I mean, the way the code reads also is that it's if you're in a residential district, which we aren't, we're in a commercial district, and or it's a residential district or use. And so you're right, Adam, it's that little or use piece that never sort of clarifies, is it 1 or 100 or, you know, that's something that we'll work through with planning, but
okay.
It's definitely.
Yeah, that's my question is because I would imagine it would be a pretty big stumbling block, or at least thing to think about. And so it would be a discussion with planning to be able to work on that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
That's all for me.
Thank you, Board Member Sharon. Board Member Wicks, questions for staff and or the applicant?
Well, I'm gonna continue to beat up this 5-foot setback because I'm still not satisfied with what I've heard. The project before us tonight is a residential project. So why doesn't it have a 5-foot setback? That's a rhetorical question. I'm confused on the language in our zoning code, and that a 5-foot adjacent to a residential zone seems to be clear, and us as architects, we can design to that. But the or use is the problem for me. And this project's come down a very long path to get to where it is. Very well developed design plans before us tonight to comment on. And one of our purviews is to comment on the site design. And I think we need to for both the applicant and for us to comment on this project, we need to figure out where this 5-foot setback lands.
Chair Kincaid, this is Bill Rose, if I can just chime in here briefly. So these are great questions. And I think as the board knows well, on concept design review, staff doesn't do a complete analysis of the zoning code. So I would suggest that the board review, comment, respond to the plans that have been presented tonight. We will do a more complete analysis once the project is fully submitted. We're actually going to do that analysis, starting immediately. We know this is an issue, but just back to the idea of the concessions. When the project pursues affordable housing and they have a right to concessions, those concessions are directly aimed at development standards, and a setback is exactly that. It's a development standard. So there is a mechanism to deal with this. But again, we haven't done the detailed analysis. So I would really recommend the board just stay focused on what is proposed tonight. And then we do have mechanisms to address it.
Thank you for the clarification, Bill. It seemed like we were starting to open up Pandora's box by saying, well, here's what we'd like to see in a 5-foot setback that isn't before us tonight. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's why I just recommend we stay with the plan that's presented tonight.
Okay. Question for the applicant team. Are you securing spaces in the 7th Street parking garage for this project? And if so, how many?
We are in discussion with Kim Nadeau and the parking district, but we're also directed through the amended plan to unbundle parking. So we're being asked through the amended stationary and downtown plan to sort of separate your parking from your units. So it's a little hard for us at this point to determine how many of those we would need, or whether we would even do that. Because under the amended plan, which is probably the plan under which this is going to be reviewed, our choice, as Adam said, we have the choice of picking which plan. We would pick the no minimum parking requirement plan. And I think, Henry, the market also, you know this, it's, the market will tell us if we need to secure a certain amount of spaces within that garage. There's 750 spaces in that garage. So I'll bet you there isn't 40% of them aren't used or are used. And so it's certainly, as we work through this and we sort of determine financing and bank structure and market and things like that, we would definitely start having a bigger conversation, but we haven't solved that problem. We haven't solved that yet.
Okay, thank you for that clarification on that. As projects like this come before us, securing parking in parking lots is going to start to tally up, and I won't say any more about it than that at this point. But question for the architect: the monitors in your design inspiration photos, could we see that on screen for just a second?
Yeah, I'll pull it up right now. 1 second, I'm sorry. And which slide was that?
Pretty early on, Ross.
It would be that probably slide 11, I think.
Yeah.
Or 10, sorry.
10. So I like the industrial roof form that you've selected, and it's got a really nice rhythm to it. And I'd be curious to hear some of my comments from my other fellow board members. But the thing I like about it is it's a consistent rhythm, and a 2 different roof pitches forming the monitor, done for that reason of putting lights in it to allow space in those large industrial spaces. If you could go to your end elevation, I think it's your next to last slide. It'll show that south elevation, next one, that one. So there's two forms that are pitched one direction, and then the other one that's pitched the other direction. Is there a structural reason, or are you? I didn't see any glass going in those forms. Is there a reason why you pitched Well, I'd just like to hear your methodology and why you pitched it a different direction.
Sure. Well, first of all, the one on the, well, a couple of simple answers. No, there is no glass in any of these roofs. These would be, we're looking at a couple of different construction methods for achieving this. Second of all, the pitch on the corner of Rosa and Mendocino is a little taller. The peak is a little taller than the other two to sort of bring a little more prominence to that corner. But honestly, we were looking at, we looked at this several different ways. We're not an industrial building. We are not, you know, these roof forms without glass in them are not there to provide north light into the units. This was really just a way of creating some rhythm along here, a little bit of different character. You'll notice that the building facades are not identical either. So we didn't want to have the roofs, you know, have to be, you know, uniform, all facing the same directions when the facades below them were more varied, let's say. So it was really more a sort of an expressive approach.
Okay. That satisfies my curiosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Wicks. Vice Chair Hedgepeth, questions for the applicant and or staff?
Thank you, Chair Kincaid. Just a couple. One is on your parking. I noticed from all your plans, you have typical floor elevations to house the residential. As I understand it, to receive the 9 stalls, I'm familiar with City Park and Klaus and the various vendors. There isn't a line drawn below the actual grade, but it would appear that you would be creating a dig out, a cavity vertically down, receiving those other stalls. Typically, the way Klaus works, it's there's always one space left, so you can park 9 cars, but you have a 10th, and in the shuffling, there's always a spare, so to speak. But it appears, other than erupting into the second floor, you're going to be getting a backhoe out to provide said count?
Yes, that's correct. There would be a series of pits below each of those stalls, and you're also correct about there needing to be permanently empty stalls to allow the cars to move in and shuffle around. I don't believe those pits are shown on any of our, well, sounds like they're not shown on any of our drawings, but they would be there. Sure. The other thing, just if we could go to 820, the west elevation, it's kind of in the middle of things, Andrew, but I just want to go to that slide.
Warren, I was just thinking this is probably not in the PowerPoint. It's in the PDF plans.
Okay, it's in the PDF. Okay, then we'll just go to the site. We'll just go to the site plan. Thanks. Nice catch, Drew. What I'm saying, since it's let's just go to the site plan there. Just a general comment. I'm very aware of concessions, and I was going to I think clarify. This is a clarifying question. You know, since your office is in San Francisco, and as we drive through San Francisco over the decades, I can go to 1920, 1973, 2019. We have residential buildings. Many of them have retail or something on the ground floor. And as far as fire assembly and fire code, all of your designs here show a thoughtful fire shielding by being windowless at the west end. You've got an elevator rated and walls rated. And my understanding here is that by maintaining your building design, not receding back 5 feet, like in San Francisco, the adjacent building to the west can favor itself with windows, if it wants to do a multi-story building, cheek to cheek, as I may say it in a British way. You have the capacity there for that building to come alive over time with more density. And in its current rendition, as mentioned, it's not looking at windows on its west side. So I'm this is not so much a planning situation, but I just wanted to illuminate the proceedings by mentioning about fire and assemblies and ratings that I believe here it appears to be a win-win in residential futures for the west adjacent property with the retention of this project. It's really a Santa Rosa zone that was anticipating residential to residential, but when we go urban like this, maybe refinements or amendments can happen in the downtown station area plan, because from fire assembly standpoint, you have the workings of I'll call it a yearling city. Santa Rosa never really excelling to what San Francisco is as an urban place, but as a young and spry city, it can follow the same precedents, as I understand it, in fire assemblies and adjacent courtesies with residential. That's my questions, or at least semi-comments.
Forgive me, I'm trying to dig the question out of there.
Well, the question is, you never anticipated poking windows on your west side. Your elevation.
No, we did not ever. Okay, I understand. Yeah, for the reasons that you outlined, we did not anticipate poking windows on the west side of the building. We're so close to the adjacent property line that they're not permitted by the building code, actually.
Yeah.
And so further, we also have to provide a small separation for seismic movement of our building adjacent to that property line. So we're back to the tune of about 9 inches currently. But yeah, those are all San Francisco lessons applied here. As you quite correctly state.
Yes, it's 1 inch per floor. You've shown it. Those are my questions. Thank you.
I guess following on that line of questions, the same would be true for the northeast elevation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I guess I'm up. So I just want to talk about the roof system a little bit. On the east and west elevations, it looks like the roof line continues down standing seam into the siding, which is a great look. I'm just wondering how you're going to deal with rainwater, condensation water on those elevations. And then I'll follow with the question, since it's along the same lines. On the south elevation, I'll call it in between building units, and there's a dark line. I'm guessing that those are downspouts, but that's just a guess. So if you could clarify that and kind of expand on how you're taking water off the roof, I guess.
Sure. Well, the caveat here is that we're in conceptual design, but in order not to appear to be swerving your question, you've pointed out a detail that is kind of critical to the execution of this sort of transferring the standing seam on the roof down to the face on Mendocino. And what we would anticipate is that there would be a gutter running along that edge, just a few inches back from the transition from roof to wall, that would catch that water, and then that could be taken internally to the building. And it might even be that has some kind of a perforated cover on it to give a bit more sort of visual continuity to the roof in that location. It is a detail we're working through. We understand the complexity of turning one into the other, specifically as it relates to the issue that you've raised, but that's a detail that we would think we could resolve that pretty favorably. And actually, as we look at this facade, that sort of reveal between the three elements is perhaps more of an architectural expression. We would anticipate in a building like this bringing the water down through one of the demising partitions between the units, which tie in with the way that this facade is articulated. We wouldn't anticipate at this stage that there would be rainwater leaders coming down in those slots on the side of the building. That is not to say that that couldn't be figured out and actually be quite an elegant solution as well. But I think we've left both options on the table at this point for, for further development.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And then while we're on this elevation, what other kind of concepts did you go through in either your charrettes or I know you kept this clean look. I'm just wondering, what other ideas were thrown out there? It's a sleek look, and I'm making comments now, but rather than wait and give my opinion, I'd like to hear from the team as to, how you got here.
Sure. I suppose that's a sort of question as to our process, really. And I think that's a very, interactive process between us and the owners, working with Pauline and Peter and others from the owner's side. And we for us, this was not a foregone conclusion by any means. We looked at 5 or 6 different design concepts for the building. I think the reason we really zeroed in on this was, because of the kind of the way it handled the scale and the proportion of the building along Ross Street. Other solutions we looked at were perhaps a little more massive when we didn't break the building up in this way. We looked at breaking it up into 5 pieces, 3 pieces. We know that, as designers, we prefer to use odd numbers. So that was an important thing. And the 5 pieces started to become too busy. The 3 pieces was feeling a little more like it had a bit more presence and a bit more clarity. And then, the roof forms, this option with these modulated roof forms was one of several that we looked at. Some that were flat, some that had peaks. And again, it was more of a sort of iterative process to get to what we felt was a strong and clean design solution appropriate for the site. I'm not sure I answered your question fully. I'm not sure I'd know how to do it without running through all of the different versions that we studied, but hopefully it can give you a little window into our process, and that this isn't one and done for us by any means. This is a sort of a long and a very involved process with a lot of different stakeholders.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. That was very helpful. Can we go to site plan with Ross Street on it? The built site plan, sorry. Yeah, that's fine. So can somebody direct interim senior planner Ross of where the off-site ends for this project? So I'm guessing on the north side, it's at the property line. On the west side, does it get built out to the property line as far as on the street, and then end kind of at that corner with the development?
Well, I can tell you that we also have fire department requirements on this. So we have to be a minimum of 15 feet from the building to the curb line. We have to be a minimum of 15 feet. So we are building out. So those improvements that you see on the north side of Ross Street against the building, those are, part of that is to allow fire department access along there, because you have to be minimum 15 and a maximum 30. So yeah, some of that, so we essentially are at the property line, but we are going to have to build these offsite improvements in order to meet the fire department requirements for access. We've sort of shifted everything a little bit south so that we could still create the EVA, still create limited access, vehicle access building, because you got to get trash out and you've got to get the car share program. And then sort of in the middle of that is where we're trying to limit through traffic. So we're not trying to sort of limit the vehicle access both on the south and the north side. Questions, Scott?
Yeah, I get that. But as far as when this phase gets built, it just would take it to the whatever it is, the southwest edge of the building.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we haven't proposed phasing it at this point. I think that's something we're still looking at.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that helps too.
Chair Kincaid, I think I've got a question that maybe this will help your question.
Sure, go for it.
So you're proposing essentially redoing Ross Street between B Street and Mendo as I'd call it a pedestrian-friendly alley, LA maybe, and there's a significant amount of improvement that would. Does Cornerstone own the Brickyard in addition to the
no, we do
Democrat building to the south, and thus essentially you would only need to find buy-in from the building owner directly adjacent to this. Does that make sense? Do you understand my question?
Yes.
In terms of how you would build out the entire street, because it's owned by the city, but obviously if you guys owned all the properties around it, it would be an easier sell for the city to say, yeah, go ahead and do it.
We do not own the Brickyard Center building, but we do own the Press Democrat building.
Did that help, Scott?
Yep.
At all?
Okay. Thank you. And I just lost it. Where are we at? One of the public comments or questions was what type of building construction are you looking at for this? Is it modular or TBD, or can you comment on that?
I would say at this point we are not looking at modular. We're looking at ground up traditional construction, let's say. However, we are investigating a series of different structural systems. This is a 8-story building which keeps that top floor under 75 feet, so it opens up a lot of different possibilities in terms of how we might approach the structure of this building. And we continue to explore those, beyond this conceptual stage.
Great, appreciate it. So those are all my questions. We can go back through the board now for comments. Let's start with Board Member Weigel.
Could I just have one more question, actually?
Sure, yep.
Okay. Sorry, Drew. I was reminded as we were going through that one further question on the west elevation. A question about the standing seam cladding is draped all over the west side to the east side. That's the coming down that entire face. Is this the cladding?
It's intended to be, yes.
Okay. And it looks like it's coming down to the same elevation as on the east side for balance. I understand this is conceptual, of course.
Yeah, it would be similar to what's happening on the east side in terms of height. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that those two conditions would ever be, seen, perceived at the same time, or, whether that balance is necessarily critical, but it is the intent, you're right, to bring that darker material down on the west side as well.
Of course, yeah. Of course, those are the details that, as designers, we see, but not everyone else necessarily sees. But I just wanted some clarification on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Board Member Sharon. Okay, Board Member Weigel, comments.
Sure. Applicant, design team, great package. Again, like I said last night, really good packages, make it easy to comment. I noticed along the, I really like the ground floor interaction that you guys have going, both on Ross Street and then turning the corner to Mendo. I think the other thing I'm wondering about is you have this like depth push on the south side to on Ross side, but it seems to lack that on the the Mendocino elevation, and I'm wondering maybe if you couldn't explore a little bit more depth in between the sidewalks and your facades there to kind of match what's going on. In terms of providing relief, I guess, along the pedestrian experience. People drive way too fast on Mendocino, and so providing perhaps that extra buffer for someone to be closer to the building as opposed to the street might be helpful. There's a couple of things related to that are in our design guidelines that I did not see that I think might be beneficial. And so I mentioned pedestrian protection. I didn't really see anything on Mendocino in that regard in terms of bollards or maybe the little metal tree things that are indicated are that. But there is a cross section in Quadriga's drawings that seems to indicate that there's something out there. It just doesn't appear flushed out. And that's per 2.2.6 and 2.2.7. There's also a good guideline about pedestrian protection for your head for when it rains. And then there isn't any. And I thought it might be interesting to introduce another design element there if it works within the context of what you're trying to create in terms of an eyebrow or something like that for pedestrian protection when it does rain, which it does here in the wintertime. But that would, I think, further activate and create some interest to the corner. The design guidelines also have one other element about height, building setbacks in the building core area. And it says it's goal 2.3.13. And it said, pardon my children also, reduce the appearance of a building's scale and streetscape presence, help control wind at the ground floor, and create a continuous street wall edge. And it specifically calls out Mendocino Avenue between College Avenue and 4th Street, which is where this building is located, that there should be a step back above the 3rd floor. Now, that being said, I kind of like what you have going on design-wise. So I don't want to force you to do a step back. I just want you to think about it. Because it is going to reduce your floor plates from the 3rd floor up in terms of square footage and whatnot. But there is a design guideline for that, and staff is somewhat beholden to that. I would be okay to kind of let it go on this one, just because there's some unique interest about the way that you're turning the corner, and it doesn't feel overly massive to me, but that does exist. So I would encourage you to look at that. What else here? So because primarily the south facade, the Ross Street facade, is primarily south facing, I have some current concerns about radiant heat gain. And I know to probably name one of your competitors in San Francisco, David Baker Architects has done some really unique things with the aluminum or Corten kind of shading that you've indicated around those Juliet balconies, but they've done it in a more holistic manner for all the windows on a facade. And they've done that through, shadow studies and whatnot, and kind of found the perfect depth to shade the windows. So I would encourage you to look into that for all the windows on probably in particular the south facade. The west and the east, I think there's another solution there. And I don't think high performance glazing with AC pumping inside is really the best solution from a sustainability and long-term standpoint. Passive solar design is the best way to go. And I guess my last comment would be, I think Scott brought up the little gray divider. I really appreciate that. It's a very small articulation, but I'm wondering, you reference row houses. Does it make sense to subtly change the color between the row houses that you've got, as opposed to creating a monolith, which you kind of have right now? From a color standpoint, does it make sense to create a color rhythm as well? And I don't know that answer, and I'm just encouraging you to look into that and see if that, doing that maybe creates less of a massive facade for the whole building. And I think I had one more thing written on the plan set here. Let me find it. Actually, I don't. That was it. So great project. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I really like the mix of use on the ground floor. I think that's critical for this type of infill development. I think this is going to be a building that people are going to want to live in because it just seems fun and playful. So thank you very much for your proposed building.
Thank you, Board Member Weigel. Board Member Sharon, comments for the applicant team.
Thank you. Thank you, staff, for a great informative presentation, and thank you, applicant, and the entire team for a great proposal and wanting to invest as much energy and funds and design thought into the city. And yeah, as Mr. Rumble mentioned in his public comment about this being as part of a whole vision for the city, I see this as a really great piece that can add in and adds into the overall future vision. And this is one of the things I like about this proposal, is that it's providing for the now, for the needs that are apparent now, but also thinking of how it can fit in and play a part and be kind of a trailblazer. And going along with your proposal for the smart site that you had last night, and I apologize for not being able to be at the meeting. I would have been supportive of that project as well. And the idea of this being, as Drew just mentioned, is a place where people will want to live, and being kind of a trailblazing, larger, taller, more dense structure. I really can see this building as being able to visually act as a beacon right to downtown. It announces itself down Mendocino Ave as you turn past College, and then you'll be able to see it from Courthouse Square. And so going along with that, I really like the south facade with the bright, the really clean lines and the white lines, the white face that you have. And then with having the rhythm of the industrial informed roofing. I think it's a really beautiful building, and I think it could be really, really eye-catching and will be attractive. I think you're doing a great job with being a good neighbor and selling it to the community and wanting to knit yourself into the community, which I think will be also very important with being one of the first, hopefully first of many taller, more dense buildings, and to show that this can actually be not just a plopped monolith, but actually be a functioning part of the city. And I think with all of what you're thinking of trying to tie into the history, the industrial history, with the materials that you're looking at, going with the childcare aspect is really great. Affordable by design. You're thinking innovatively about it, and then I really like the fact that you're tying into not just the building and the site, but wanting to expand from there and thinking about the streetscape as well. Because as we know now with the slow streets movements that are happening just over the past 6 months, we can use our exterior spaces as assets, and not just as thoroughfares, and so I think that what you're doing is providing some really good examples of how you can do that, and I appreciate your thinking holistically about these couple of blocks. It was great to hear some of the comments from the public as well, that you are being a good neighbor, even through this process, just through concept. With the business owner from the Engine is Red, knowing that you're already doing outreach, you're already talking to people. That's really great. I think you can continue with that. Definitely, it's going to be really important as you go into these neighborhood meetings. One thing I think that would be very useful to have, and again, I understand this is concept at this point, and you will get to this, but since it is such a tall building, I think, of course, having a shadow study and a light study would be, sunlight study would be very useful to see of how this is going to the shadows that are going to be cast on the neighborhood and the streetscape. And I think people are really going to want to see that. And so being very clear about of how this is going to fit in, both fit in and also be that beacon. I think your choice of materials is very very sensitive as well. I do enjoy the simplified palette that you're doing. In coming up with my comments and going through the packet, one of the word that I kept writing down was relief, because you do have these tall facades. I think that bringing in the relief with the rhythm of the roof lines is a really great relief rather than just straight horizontal lines. That's providing relief. I think that the small accents that you have with the metal and the cladding, and then also especially with the wood, I think is going to be very good to continue with that, to provide relief, to have that balance. And this concept that you have now is really nicely balanced. I did ask about the west elevation there. One of our things that that we are tasked with making certain our design is that applicants are looking at all four sides of the building. It's a four-sided design. I think that west elevation, it could be, there's an opportunity there. With all those architectural and engineering concerns that you have and needs that you have, you are going to have a tall edifice there. And so thinking about something that you could do along there to either brighten or to draw the eye to that, to activate that side. You're activating the streetscape and the Mendocino side really well. And you've got going along the courtyard area is great with all of the window lines that you have. The south facade really great. I think the west side could definitely take some thought. Just thinking of that wall that you've got there. There's the new mural that's going up or is just finishing at Hyde and O'Farrell in San Francisco with the 60-foot tall monarch and butterflies and that are wrapping around the sides of the building. That you could even continue thinking boldly about that as a canvas there. I think having the cladding wrapping around the whole, going from the east side to the west side it provides that balance, but it can also be a little bit heavy too. And so I think, keep going with the playfulness that you've got when you're down in that streetscape, especially as you're moving farther down to the west side, you will be looking back at this tall wall. And so you've got something there as you're thinking of continuing to redevelop either the Press Democrat site or down where the parking lot is on D Street. You'll have something there that will be, people will be looking out on. One of the things from your proposal, I really trust that you'll be thinking about that. So continue with it. And I think this is a really great thing. And I'm really looking forward to having this move forward. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Board Member Sharon. Board Member Wicks, comments?
Thank you, Chairman Kincaid. I would like to echo some of the comments that preceded me by Mr. Board Member Weigel and Board Member Sharon, picking up where Board Member Sharon left off. If it was some sort of temporary artistic motif or some element that kept in mind that perhaps that neighbor to the west of you is going to do another 5 or 6 story building next to it, that it over time could be effectively removed or be hidden by that next building. I think that's going to be your challenge in coming up with a design that is attractive in the interim until the building is built there. I love the active pedestrian experience on the lower level on Mendocino. I'm glad to see that it's a space that whatever form it takes, it is not just residential on the ground level. I generally, given the package that we have before us, I'm generally in support of it, and kind of disappointed we don't get to see it come back before us as you continue to develop it. But in that development, I would strongly support what Board Member Weigel said about the shading on that south side, and it's just going to be brutal with that much glass with just the punched openings. I think is something you're going to want to take a look at, because the PG&E bill is going to be spinning in there. Glass continues to get better. Our R values on our walls continue to go up, but I'd love to see something that didn't detract. I was trying to think of how to phrase this to help and not just be a critique and say throw it out and redesign. I like the punched openings, and I love the movement of the glass. You have a center post and then a large window on one side and a smaller one on the other, and it helps with your eye moving up the building. I thought it was really interesting. I might rob that idea someday on something if I'm lucky to do something tall and have a need to. We get hung up on push and pull in our buildings, but for you to snake it like that, I think it was very, very effective, and really appreciate that. But at the same time, I would love to see some, unfortunately, the sun comes from the downside, and the shading element needs to kind of hit at the top of the window. But if it had some verticality to it, that I said too much, and I didn't mean to try to suggest design changes to it. I don't want to go there, other than the fact that it needs some shading on that south side. And I forget which board member said that the colors could be varied as well, which would be something to study. I kind of like the simplicity and the color as one, but it'd be interesting to see it with 3 elements, or if you start to break that south elevation into multiple elements of maybe it's 5 or 6, and that repeated on the roof line. Anyway, I'm encouraged to see projects like this come before us. We're lucky that we had back-to-back nights of pretty darn good projects. So I look forward to seeing this come to fruition, and I wish you success in working with staff, more than capable. And in some ways, they might be tougher than us. So until the next project.
I've been remiss this entire time that the applicant wanted feedback on the Ross Street concept. So why don't we, we'll go back through one last time, but everybody can kind of think about what their comments will be there. So Vice Chair Hedgepeth, comments.
Thank you, Chair Kincaid. Yes, I've heard a lot of comments in general, and I just wanted to firstly say this project is a wonderful word. It's called exuberance. There's a civic exuberance. And what I love about this project, Henry, you mentioned about borrowing things. Charles Rene McIntosh back in Edinburgh did a wonderful art school. And there's similarities. There's, in my opinion, this building has had a lot of sculptural thought. There's a serenity to the all white and the metal, the materiality. When Rennie worked back in the day, he had metal roofs and he had limestone at the time. We're not doing limestone, but I'm just reminded about how the poetry of this, there's so much going on in the large movements and the small. The the punched window openings, unlike, and you know, to his credit, David Baker does wonderful things, but what we have here, and you see it on Van Ness, these cubic, fully wrapped openings. And it's thrilling on the Mendo side to see those with that metal that flies over. And the actual rendering, this is the first time a Revit drawing maybe doesn't do justice, but if you start to think about the projections on the south side, they're not everywhere. They're in specific places, but the poetry of restraint and expression is very well executed. I'm thrilled with the roof line. I'm thinking because it's not modular, I know it's kind of broken up into these little beehives, but the final triumphant floor has the capacity for volumetric interior roof cavities. The cello music would sound different in those, but I know it's in some ways it's hauntingly high. I don't see boiler rooms. This is at 100 plus units. The crossover between singular, mechanical, you're probably going to use gas. There's no comment about solar, but how you play with mechanical and where things are hidden, maybe those headdresses, as some might call them, I want to compliment a higher, more lofty comment, and that is that they could be lofts. But all that said, when you look at maintenance long term, this is a tender thing to say, that west side, as I said, it's an inch per floor with seismic. If you did go with the applicant's metal, the standing seam, that is a 172-year worry-free, no phone calls solution. You can begin to articulate different metal patinas. You know, sometimes you can get zinc, real zinc coated metal, which is more beautiful than zinc, the simulated. But I just want to say that up that high for that long, it's a major investment, and there's big moves in this. So I know, Henry, you bring up a right point that we have engineering in glass. It's getting better and better. One idea is that if you had vertical louvers, I don't know if they're mechanical. There are firms that have, Larry Scarpa plays with a horizontally drawn sunscreen. If they get motorized, they get expensive. But I want to be mindful. It's such a tender line to walk of energy efficiency and poetry. The artist battling with an axe and the sword coming from the performance and looking at carbon footprint. So that's a tough thing. I don't know how I stand on the high wire because I don't want people to cook, but there are stealth ways to keep the poetry, the simple exuberance of this building so well executed without being too distracting. And maybe there are issues like that. I know glass heats up more from the outside in the end. Once it's in, it's tougher, and there's shading on the inside too. But my overall comments about the architecture and what it's doing, the rainwater leader approach scuppers, that would be fine. It doesn't have to have those. They can be internalized at room footage. I will talk briefly about PUEs, public utility easements and projections. I believe it's beyond about 13 feet that between playing around with the utilities in the streets, the public street known as Mendo, you can project. Now they've chosen to take the tippy top highest brow or branch and project that out. I have no issues with that. I do begin to have questions because all of us on the board sat on the new station area downtown. There was this is the retirement of the document that dates back to October 9th, 2007, my birthday. I was only 14 then. No. We now have a new document, and we have FAR, and everyone's talking about FAR. Even I've been complimenting in some guidelines being introduced by other cities as they look at it. A lot of local cities are getting more involved with FAR than this step back. So if we're going to be exuberant about the downtown, I'm wondering about retiring this 5th floor, 6th floor, and Drew, I think it's a nice catch. Obviously, we have this on the books. As these guidelines are upscaled, if FAR is the answer, it gives you the right to do buildings just like this, which I find empowering. And I can say it financially. You keep stepping a building back, you can't afford the metal. You can't afford the punched railings, the glass, that teak-lined joy that you see. It all turns into an exercise in Babylonian juggernauts, where you, or zuggurats, should I say, juggernauting zuggurat. But this is an example of a poetic building with great materials, well done. I just want to move on with some other quick closing comments. There's been, I've been the father of 4. We have a little 6-year-old we're raising who was 2 when we got her. And I'm familiar a lot with daycare, even as a 67-year-old person. And to me, the slow street has its greatest power in the community-wide drop-offs. And on the design team, as mentioned here, there are members of the proponents here, the developers who have little people. And that slow street becomes the peaceful place where horns don't honk, where your tail bumper isn't thrashed at, where you can talk to people a little more, that it's a courtesy move. And this whole idea of frantic traffic and higher insurance claims begins to quiet down. I love the idea that the whole proponent team put out there, taking a whole street all the way to the front of Macy's. That's a capital investment. I don't know who does it, whether it's jointly done, but I think it's a provocative way for 1 + 1 = 3, that the whole project has not only its roof garden, but a place of memory, great memory at the ground level. How it's capitalized, I'm not sure. And I'll close with this. It came up last night. Adam, your kind comments, you missed last night. One of the things we talked about is, as we grow the town, is food and where we get our food. And I would purport in a shameless way that all PG&E funds from the fire be focused on a downtown grocery center, which furthers green policy and allows for some place with dollars to be subsidized so buildings like this don't hunger for cars. Those are my comments.
Well, with those comments, I think I'm going to take my comments and put them in my pocket and go home. I'm certainly not the architect, and I was going to pretend to play one on TV here and throw out some ideas on the south side of the building to kind of break it up a little bit. But I think those are just more personal opinions, and we've heard from the architects in the group, and so I'll keep my comments to myself. I'll start off the secondary Ross Street commentary. We just heard from Vice Chair Hedgepeth what his thoughts are. I would echo those wholeheartedly. I wish we could do the whole thing right now, and it sounds like that could be a possibility if you did not phase the project. But I would sit here and encourage you to phase the project so that we can get this first building out of the ground and vertical, rather than waiting for this whole development, if you will, to unfold. So I also think that affordable by design is a real thing. I know, Peter, you talked about it at the beginning, and we've talked a little bit about it throughout the comments and questions, but it has allowed several young people to remain in San Francisco. We continue to see our young people leave and go elsewhere, and we're losing a lot of workforce talent here because we do not have units that are not low income prescribed, but non-affordable otherwise. So yeoman's work ahead of you to get this design finalized building permits and get it vertical and out of the ground. So let's go back through board members Weigel and Sharon and Wicks and give our thoughts on the Ross Street, slow street concept. Board member Weigel.
It's awesome. In all honesty, I've seen this in a number of other cities, bigger than our size, smaller than our size. Clearly, Quadriga's done their homework in terms of how to be playful, but also calm traffic in that nature. And then I think to Vice Chair Hedgepeth's comments about drop off for daycare and whatnot. I'm in the middle of that too. So I think that's something that a lot of people would respect and appreciate. And I think, being near parking, being near downtown businesses, there's going to be a lot of a use of whatever amenity goes into this building if it's a daycare center, so of some nature. And I actually really, I should have said this before, I really like the interface of the design between kind of like the courtyard in the back that's private and the Ross Street development. I think they're counterpoints to one another. And so that's what's really great about the property is the ability to play one off of one another. And you may not actually see it when you utilize it since it's separated by a big tall building, but I think when you look at it from a macro level at the 30,000 foot view, you can really see how they talk to one another. So very good job on the Ross Street concept.
Board member Sharon, comments on Ross Street?
Sure. Well, coming from the landscape side of things, I'm a little biased towards these types of proposals. So definitely supportive of this here. I think it's also really great. Just in general, I'm supportive of these types of projects. But also this street in particular, I think you've identified a site that's a really great opportunity because it is very underutilized just through piece, and it's very kind of frustrating to drive on and serves some purposes, but limited. And I think that you could really run with that. That idea of this project being part of the whole, of really being not, as a, coming from the landscape design side of things, all projects I think should be thought of as on the site and within the property lines that you have, but in an ideal world, you're also thinking very much beyond that and how you're splashing out into the surrounding properties, neighborhood, city as a whole. And I think that anytime that these types of projects want to engage with the streetscape is a great thing. And I think that you guys have a really great opportunity with having the PD building in your quiver as well. And thinking about other future developments. You've got, I assume that I know you've got the collab there right down on the ground floor, but there's also the Lost Church performance space that's it got off the ground and then we all shut down. And so having some, partnering with those, with projects that are projects and proposals that are here. It's great. Adding into the daycare side of things. I also have a 6-year-old, and so seeing that these types of projects really are engaging for families in a really profound way, especially along a busy corridor like Mendocino. Is a really great opportunity, and I think that can be a selling point for your building as well when you're looking at getting residents in there, and bringing families downtown. So I think Warren's got a nice idea with having groceries and amenities down there, but having the performance spaces tying into existing art proposals. There's a studio down there as well, an art studio and art gallery as well. Looking at the slow streets initiatives in general nationwide and globally, but then also here in Santa Rosa with our 4th Street corridor and the public art that's going there. And I say that, full disclosure, as someone who has a public art installation as part of that, but I think it's a really great program just in general. And I think that as that can be expanded throughout the city, I'm all for pieces of that. That's one reason why I brought up just thinking the idea of incorporating incorporating public art as murals along that side there, the west side of your building. In terms of also of engaging that space, you're thinking of the Brickyard and the restaurants there, spas, yoga and CrossFit on the childcare playground. You might want to give the people from the junior gym right on that corner there a call. They are one of the casualties of the COVID crisis. They closed down. And so that, having a young child, especially through the fires over the past few years, they were one of the few places indoors with clean air that we could actually go to with small children to engage with existing providers that are here. There are a lot of daycare, as you mentioned in your presentation, a lot of daycares are hurting. And so, trying to interface and think creatively this year. I think it's a sort of a long-winded way of saying that I think that the more you can think of this whole streetscape and your building as part of this whole, thinking as holistically as possible, will just be a benefit and an attribute for whatever you build and whatever you propose. It can only do good things for you, whether that's from community engagement, community buy-in, and from adding to the city and being a great neighbor and a good resident. So, and as I mentioned before, I think you guys are incorporating all this stuff in there, and I fully know that staff is on board with that as well. And so keep running with it. Think really creatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Sharon. Board Member Wicks, Ross Street, thoughts?
Love it. I love the slow street concept. The landscaping development that we see before us tonight is very nice. I've always liked parts of the Brickyard. It has a nice feel already and could be further enhanced by this extending down to Mendocino. So very, very supportive of what's come before us tonight and the other comments that have been expressed by my fellow board members. And before I say my last little bit tonight, I would also be supportive of seeing Mendocino elevation not step back, that it go the full height of elevation in one plane and not step back at the 3-story. And I noticed that the current, with that courtyard below that is also a very nice amenity on the ground level. It's 85 feet deep and 27 feet deep the other direction. So that's a fairly significant setback on a building. The project doesn't use 100% of the site in building footprint. It has a landscape courtyard footprint to that, but it's I think it's already got a significant setback is what I'm trying to say. So good night.
Thank you, Board Member Wicks. I'll just go ahead and throw in my 2 cents. I'm also supportive of the elevation on Mendocino Avenue continuing and not stepping back. So can throw that in there for the record. So at this time, I want to circle back with the applicant and staff and see if there's any points of clarification or questions of the board. Let's go ahead and start with interim senior planner Ross.
Thank you, Chair Kincaid. No items for clarification from me.
Great, thank you. And the applicant, any items for clarification or questions of the board?
I think you succinctly described what gave us some ideas, and back and come very soon with a formal application and move this through. So thank you for all your time tonight and last night.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comments. We really appreciate them.
I was going to say one.
Oh,
could I say
ahead,
one quick thing?
Please.
Yeah. It's just a point of record. Quick last one thing on this this slow street. The city has had budgets for maintaining parking lots and parking garages. And what's kind of astounding is at one time recently there was a lot of money being considered for the B Street surface lot of 172 stalls to be all repaved at great cost. And I was just curious, as you go through performance and city budgets, if we could defund asphalt that isn't needed as much. And so that's a very delicate word these days, but there's these capital buckets. And I couldn't resist. This is a picture. I don't know if you can see it, but I just couldn't resist the fact that this whole garden arena, this street garden arena, becomes a major amenity for all development. That parking lot will be retired sundown, but in some ways it should be written into the planning record that as slow streets populate the town, they become a de facto place where common area can be counted algebraically into projects. That's it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hedgepeth. That sounds like a good way to wrap up item 6.1. So thank you to the applicant team. And again, well wishes for getting this project through. Let's see. I think we're on item number 7. I get to the right agenda. Board member reports. Are there any board member reports? I do not see any board member reports. So moving on to item number 8, department reports. Any department reports?
No department reports for tonight. I just want to thank the board for 2 nights of very fruitful meetings. Thank you for your attendance and for your comments very much.
Yep, and I'll go ahead and close out by thanking my fellow board members also for both nights and for our little delay at the beginning. Appreciate everyone's flexibility. So good night. We are adjourned.